Welcome to the Beyond Divorce, Embracing Change podcast. My name is Michael Flores, and I will be your host while we explore the complex journey of divorce with empathy, insight, and practical knowledge. Whether you're contemplating separation, in a divorce, or looking for support post-divorce, our episodes provide expert guidance, stories, and strategies to help you through every step of the process. We are actual therapists, helping clients who sit on our couches every day through their difficulties of divorce. You are not alone. Join us as we delve in and find solutions that give you hope again. We're glad you're here.
This podcast is not intended to replace legal or personal help. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
Well, I want to welcome everyone back to the Beyond Divorce, Embracing Change podcast. I'm Michael Flores, your host, and I am so glad to have in my opinion, one of the top people in their mind of working with families and systems, and just here to share with us great information about co-parenting. And this title is The Impact of Not Co-Parenting Effect. And this will be a wonderful opportunity where we have Joe here today to help us understand a little bit about what that will be like. And things to consider as you move through it. Joe, we're so glad to have you, and thank you for doing this with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Joe, tell us where you're located. I think the listeners deserve to know your background and where you're located, and a little bit more about you.
So we're located in the north of London, a borough called Enfield, about 330,000 population. So we started as a charity in 2012, and mainly started out working with parents who were being abused by their children, adolescent children, which is a tough gig for anyone that's been through it. It's a really difficult one in terms of not just working with it, but in terms of a parent going through that. As we developed over the years, what we found was that we don't, but children are not born abusive. So there's a lot of issues and common factors. And one of those was the abuse between the caregivers, the parents. That's a big factor in our work. So we started to work with not just child-parent abuse, but families recovering from domestic abuse, so that they can hopefully make sense of what they've been through and rebuild a relationship, a loving relationship. And then we found that if we didn't work with perpetrators of domestic abuse, then they may well just go on and be abusive in other relationships. So we developed our own solution-focused adult perpetrators, male and female perpetrators can join that. And parent support groups. So it's kind of developed over dealing with one aspect. But then as we found common factors in our clients, we thought we need to do something. We need to do something else as well, because it's almost like just working on one element when there's all these other factors having a play. So we've been going since 2012. And as tough as it is, it can be extremely rewarding as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And are these families, do they stay together a lot of times? Are we trying to mend relationships? Do we deal with families that split up in the middle of it, in the middle of treatment or before or post? Kind of, what's the dynamic there with the families?
Yes. So the majority of the families that we get referred are single parents, lone parents. I don't know what the description is in the States. And they've either left an abusive partner or just, drifted apart and divorced. So there are cases when it's a family unit, both parents are still around. What we find when the parents do go through separation, if it's not amicable, it still has a massive impact on that young person, those children that are involved. we've seen children weaponized almost, where one of the partners still wants to have that controlling, coercive sort of relationship, but is using the child as that weapon. I think in the UK we call it parental alienation. It's not a legal term, so it's not against the law as such, but it's recognized in the court system that parental alienation is a factor.
Yes.
And
I think
unfortunately, it's a lot.
our country, we call it the same. They actually have what they call a PAS, a parental alienation syndrome. So
Right.
there's a lot of work, it seems to be, where people want this to either be a legal matter or a mental health matter. I look at it from a systemic matter. As a therapist, it's a systems deal. It's an approach. Yep. But absolutely, I will say that we have the same term here, parental alienation. It is brought up, I want to say 80 to 90% of the time in divorce cases that we deal with. It's brought up. Yeah. We have to, because we know in family therapy, Joe, is triangulation, parentification. There's other things that exist that aren't necessarily alienation, but it's being mislabeled. So we see that here also. So let's get into some of this. When parents are not co-parenting through the process, what are some things that kind of happen? What's the outcome of that?
So we had a young girl not long ago, actually. So she comes in with her mum. Dad contacted us and said, I don't think what you're doing is working. I don't really feel that my daughter needs your support. Then, and she was really getting a lot out of the sessions. But what Dad was trying to do was to stop her coming in, basically. But using the excuse that I don't think the sessions are working for my daughter. And we saw firsthand the change in her when he started to she started to misbehave in sessions. And we can't prove that that's what's happened, but I'm 99% sure that this is something that he's asked her to do. She came back last week, funnily enough, and these were her words. She said, I'm just one of Dad's little minions. So it was almost like she was under his spell, under his control. Because I did meet with him. He was very charming, very, even though he was questioning our methods and what we were doing. The daughter did eventually in that session, because I asked her, what would be good for you out of these meetings? What is it you hope? And she said about how her parents got along. And he said, oh, that's a really great idea. I think that's a really good idea. So I said to her, do you know what? When you're at home, just make a list of things that you'd like to see change. What would, and how would that benefit you if these changes were made? And he said, yeah, brilliant idea. And then he stopped her coming.
Wow.
And she only came back last week because Nicole, one of our support workers, was approached by Mum because her abuse at home was getting... What we find is that if there is contact with the controlling parent or whatever, the behavior of that child really spikes when they come back. So, the abuse, the language, everything changes. So, she came in and she was different. And that's when she's beginning to see. The really, really sad thing about this one, Michael, is that she's neurodiverse as well. So he was basically, manipulating her to avoid coming in. And, so that's when it becomes really, really difficult. If we can't co-parent in a way. And even when I work with the adult perpetrators, even though they're saying, well, I'm not with that partner anymore. Why do I have to do this program? But you still have a child together. You still have a responsibility to do your best for that child. And
When
sometimes
the parent, I'm sorry, Joe, go ahead.
no, that's right. I was just saying is that sometimes they lose sight of that there's these young people that are in the middle that want to love both parents, that want to please both parents.
Do you find that to be more common, that the children love both their parents, almost regardless of the parents' own issues, and they also want to please both parents in some form?
Yeah, I think, and it seems strange, but often they want to please the parent that was abusive more than the custodial parent, in a sense, because it's almost like I need that parent's love because I know I've got my custodial parents' love because they're the ones that are looking after me every day and, having those conversations with me, taking me to school, doing all those things that need to be done. And it's just, as a young person, we often want to please our parents regardless of what we've had to witness. And not all the time. Some young people are quite resilient and adamant and refuse to see the other parent, no matter what kind of inducements are put in the way. They know what they did was wrong and they don't want anything to do with them.
And Joe, what difference does it make when two parents learn to work together? What difference have you noticed in children when parents do work together?
Yeah, I mean, we have parents that have separated and they come in and support that child. When that child can see that these two parents want the best for them, and it obvious, you can see it. Sorry, is that me?
Sorry.
you can feel it in the meetings where they are both almost saying, "Look, we love you, we care for you, but this is unacceptable, and this is what we expect." Because, even though it looks like the child may think, "Well, I'm not going to do as you say, I don't want that kind of thing," deep down, that that's what they're craving because they want two parents that love them and want the best for them. Who doesn't? Really?
Yeah. I was a child once. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I get it in our work when we're working with kids that are dealing with co-parenting issues. And what's really amazing is I find that it's a lot of the times a top-down issue. It's almost as if we could help parents fully understand, we don't try to teach them what they're doing is wrong, but we try to help them understand that when they choose to focus on the child's need and not on their own particular wants, the child is extremely benefited from that. And it may not be what the parent ultimately wants, but the child needs it. And there's a huge level of influence that happens where relationships are mended and things are pulled together. We've had kids, Joe, their behavior is so, I don't know how to say this, just bad in a sense. They're not bad kids. They're just their behavior. Yeah. And what's interesting is they will say things like, I had one kid say, and I recently shared this, is he was surprised his parents even came together and were able to work together in his discipline. Like they agreed on the discipline that needed to happen. And the child appreciated that more than the fact that he was being disciplined. Like he was not upset about being disciplined. He was appreciative that they finally agreed on the fact that he needed to be disciplined. It was shocking to me. Like that's how powerful these parents can be when they work together. What are some other examples, Joe, that you've come across where parents have either worked together or haven't worked together, and what was the outcome of that?
Yeah, so I mean, often what we hear from one of the parents is, he goes to mums or dads. They're the good time parent. They don't have to do all the boring stuff. They don't have to get them up for school. They don't have to do this. They don't have to do that. And, having two sets of rules is difficult for anyone to navigate. So I'm with my parent five days of the week, and maybe I see another parent every weekend. So I'm having to navigate what my expectations are in one place, what they are in the other. So that becomes confusing. So when parents are working together and they both have those high even let's just say education, they've both got those high expectations,
Okay.
have you done your homework? Can I support you with that? Being involved in the child's schooling, just knowing that, oh, that mum and dad both came to parent evening, even though they're not together, it shows that there's a unity, that two of the people closest to me in my world want me to succeed. That's an amazing gift for that young person, because otherwise, what the young person is hearing is two totally different messages, and they start to resent. They will begin to resent their parents for that, because I remember seeing one man who was extremely abusive when they were together, and then they were separated. Then we went to see him to see if he could put his input, because his daughter was missing her dad despite of everything that he'd done, and it was quite horrific. And he just said, well, children don't remember anything unless they're 8 years and older. So he was trying to absolve himself from anything because he left a relationship when she was 6 or 7. And I think what we got to appreciate is that young people, whether you argue in front of them or upstairs or downstairs, that's going to have an impact. And when you're separated, that impact is still the same. It's not much different, really. So when they work together, like we were saying before, that young person feels that they've got hope, that they've got some sort of future relationship, because what we find happens is some young people will start to resent the custodial parent, particularly in the sense of, why did you two stay together? Why did we have to see all of this? Do you see what I mean? And they start to lose respect for both parents. And if you don't have that, especially what we've noticed, if they don't have that bond within their own family, they'll find it in other places that isn't healthy for them. Especially there's a lot of gang culture in London, and we've seen it increase over the years, a lot of knife crime. And these are young people that are lost.
And you suppose, Joe, it started in a family. It started within the family system, that they found themselves lost as a result of issues in the family system that were never resolved.
I think this idea, and I've heard this a lot, where parents might say to me, "Yeah, but they were never in the room. They're never in the room when we were having an argument. They were never around." Children can sense if something's wrong, right? They don't have to be actually witnessing it. And if you're in your bedroom and you're hearing shouting coming downstairs, your mind is probably thinking a lot worse than what's actually happening. So we can't have this idea that young people are just innocent bystanders and not affected, because we're kidding ourselves if that's what we think. So sometimes I think the alienation happens because maybe the parents just don't want to admit the things that they did that have had an impact on this young person. So we start getting one blaming the other and the other blaming the other, and no one willing to back down. And the real sufferers in all this are the children that are stuck in the middle. So when it works, it's beautiful. Like I say, they don't have to be together, but that young person knows, if I ask something from one parent, I ain't going to manipulate the other one, because they are both saying, no, that ain't going to fly here, buddy. Because children can manipulate, right? They can manipulate situations if they're allowed to. So it's about co-parenting, that you both have the same goals and hopes and wishes for your young people,
Is that where
And
co-parenting starts, Joe? Does co-parenting start with parents coming to a conclusion of what they want for their child?
I think, yeah, I think otherwise what happens in those sessions is we can get bogged down in, well, you know, if you weren't out drinking all night, or if you weren't gambling, or if we had a better relationship, you start getting into that blame game. Um,
Uh-huh.
and for any relationship to change it, there needs to be a motivation for that to happen. Otherwise, why would I bother changing? Because it's always someone else's fault, right?
Yeah.
So I can just doing what I'm doing. If we can find what that motivation is, and hopefully they still have unconditional love for their child, then that's what we would work with. So who would benefit most from you two co-parenting better would be a
Oh my
question.
gosh. Let me write this down. Ask that question again, Joe. How did you ask that?
But yeah, who would benefit the most if you two were co-parenting in a better way? Those similar sort of questions. And generally, eventually they begin to realize, actually, my children will. And what difference, the solution focused questions, because it's very, very easy, like we said, to get into that blame game, and no one takes responsibility. And these young, like I say, they're like a tennis ball. It just goes backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards.
It's right.
Mm.
I've had a kid say to me, Joe, in a session, my parents are playing a game of tug of war and I'm the rope.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, isn't it? The kids can come up with the coolest ways to describe their experiences.
Yeah.
I stole that from, and the child, I, of course, can't give out the names because of HIPAA, but I stole this from the child, and I created a training for professionals called Tug of War. And
No.
it was really the impact, the roles that kids play in divorce. And we actually have labeled them gatekeeper, distractor, and avoider. And we notice that there's a pattern of behavior that children go through when their parents are going through turmoil. And what's really interesting is we get kids that have witnessed trauma, I wouldn't say trauma, have been traumatized, witnessing family violence. We've had kids witness drug use in one of their parents. I mean, you name it. The kids have seen more than I've seen, maybe even in my own lifetime.
Yeah.
And so the court is asking us to help mend these relationships. Now, I do the same thing. I agree that if we can get the parents working together and starting there's a huge change. I've been tasked to work with families that are far away from my office, like hours away from me. And since I'm so far removed from them, I don't get to actually physically see them in office. I do this really unique thing that I've also learned from our model, which is I find where the parents align. We call it parental alignment. And I always tell parents that you have to align where you're headed first, right, before you shoot your arrows. So you can make sure you hit the target. It's great to have goals. Where do we align on these goals? What are we trying to accomplish? Well, long story short, I have sent emails out to parents and have stated, I've learned that you align here. I also tell them that anything you agree on that does not supersede a court order will be followed. And it gives this authority back to these parents to work together and ultimately to benefit the child. And I've found that to be extremely beneficial. And the model itself is what taught me how to do that. I give it back to them, right? I'm not the solution, I'm the guide, right? I'm along for the ride. I'm the guy in the taxi. I'm not the driver.
And if I'm in that kind of a situation, I always start with, so what is it that you do both agree on? Let's start with what you actually agree on, and how did you both manage to come to that agreement? What does that say about you two working together? Do you see what I mean? So
can both parents ask these questions, Joe? Can parents ask these same questions, or do they need to wait for a therapist to ask that?
Well, I mean, no, not necessarily. I guess, unfortunately, I guess the court system is adversarial, right? There's a winner and a loser. It's kind of that kind of thing.
How's treated.
Yeah. So I remember having a whole family of adults, and how they were going to, actually it's the reverse of this, how they were going to look after a mom who had severe dementia. And, they disagreed on everything. So I thought, let me start with What is it that you actually agree on? We want our mum to be well. Okay, what are we all doing towards that? So once, I think it starts the conversation flowing better if we start with where we agree, and just how we managed to come to that conclusion. Because otherwise, like I say, we get into this, you did this, I did that, and often if we feel that a parent or one of the parents is not in that frame of mind because of, like you said, if they've been through a lot of domestic abuse, there could be PTSD, there's definitely trauma there. We would recommend that we send them to our trauma specialist, and we've got a therapist that will do that work. Because I think if you're not in that right frame of mind, if you're suffering from trauma, it's very, very difficult to start thinking about solutions and ways forward.
Right.
Because the trauma is still having that impact on the brain and the brain's ability to learn new ideas. So sometimes we really need to understand, are these parents ready? Often we get families that are mandated to come. They haven't got a choice.
That's right.
And that can also be difficult. But in working the way that we do, in the terms of, how would you know these sessions are useful? It's giving them the role of expert, and giving them, like you said, a direction for the work. Otherwise, I'm directionless. You're just coming here to offload, which is great. It tires me out. You might feel better for about half an hour, but the issues still haven't been addressed. And if that continues, if that keeps continuing, then we might look at, is there some therapy that needs to be done first?
So let me go over that with you then. How does a parent discern that they're in the right frame of mind to work as a co-parent?
I think sometimes in terms of the relationship that they had, if it was controlling and if it was coercive, which is very difficult to prove because it's not like a bruise. I can go and say, this is what happened.
Yes, sir.
Once you're out of that relationship, then anything the other person says, because of your past experiences, almost, he's trying to be controlling. He's trying to control me. This is what you did, or this is what she did. So in cases like that, it's very, very difficult to make any forward movement. And how can any of us know when someone really genuinely made that change and wants to make that change? It's through their actions more than their words. So, when they start doing the right things rather than just saying the right things, then at least we know we're on the right path. But if the past keeps dragging them back, then that's a good indicator that we're not going to get much forward movement. It's like you say, it's like tug of war, but in reverse, someone's pulling me back.
Yes, we pull ourselves back. Yeah, the co-parents I work with pull themselves back due to the history that they've experienced. And so even if here's my favorite one. I get this comment all the time with co-parents. Oh, they're Disneyland dad, right? Or they're acting their best behavior because they're under a court order. And I have literally responded, Joe, where I've said something like, well, I'm going to use that to my benefit because it means that they can do it. Right? So if they're putting on a good show, then that means they can behave in this way. They actually know how to behave this way. And that is a helpful. So I wonder how I can capture that. And so when I do that to the parent, they kind of look at me a little odd. They're like, well, no, I'm trying to tell you that they're playing. Like I'm trying to tell you they're, and I said, they may be, right? They may be. One of the other questions I get a lot from parents is, how many times do we have to do this until we can just not have to do this anymore? Like we've got court, we've had other therapists involved. We did marital counseling. The child's been in counseling forever. we've made no progress. And you can just tell everyone's tired and worn down and maybe therapy's been overdone. And so what I wonder is, what would you say your experience has been with co-parents or working with parents to say to them, this is what you must keep in mind as you're going through the therapeutic process so that you can actually see change or experience the change you're hoping for? What would you encourage them to do?
Well, I think as with situations like that where you say it's almost like we've exhausted every avenue, nothing seems to be working. We seem to be stuck. So one of the mantras of solution focus, as you know, is if something's not working, stop doing it. If I want things to change, I have to do something different. Otherwise, I get into this circular pattern, and nothing shifts. So it sounds like what you're describing is parents that have just become totally stuck, and they can't see another way of doing things. But unless they do something different, how can you expect things to change? And again, you're going to get this stubbornness. Well, he has to change first. She has to change first. No, you both have to do something different. Otherwise, how can you hope that things will ever improve or ever change? So, in cases like that, I would say, just humour me. If this was to work, what differences would you notice in your co-parenting? I want to know, if I don't know what outcome people are looking for, like I said, we could be talking till the cows come home. That's an expression here. I don't know if it is there.
It is.
So imagine, I know, you've been through a lot of counseling, been a lot of therapy. It sounds like you're really frustrated with the whole thing, and you almost resigned that things wouldn't ever change. But just humour me. If something was to work, what differences would that make? Because it's the differences I'm interested in, not the process. What's going to be happening at the end of this? And as you know, then we work back and we say, is any of this happening now? It might be rare. It might be, I don't know, last month he collected the children on time, and we had a conversation. It wasn't heat. Right. What difference did that make? We're looking for the smallest sign that something's better. And I'm a great believer that there's always some chink of light. It's just that we become so problem saturated, we don't notice them. And
That's
they go un. So, like, Michael, we look for those exceptions. And like you, going back to you, what you were saying about the corpse, he may be behaving differently because he knows the consequences if he doesn't or if she doesn't. But actually, what difference is it making to you when you are doing that? Even if you've been forced to do it, how is it making a difference? Who else has noticed? And if they say, yeah, the kids noticed it, and how they were pleased? Were they pleased? Yeah, they were. How do you know they were pleased? Because we had a nice hug. We had a nice conversation. It could have been 1 hour. That's the 1 hour that we would focus on, as you know, because the rest of it is just too problem saturated. So it's finding those very short moments when they've got the co-parenting that they want, that they think's useful.
Absolutely.
That's all we can do. We can't force. No one can force someone to change. They have to see that actually there is a benefit to it. Like you said, even if I'm going through the motions, but I can actually see. Actually, we had a really good conversation the other day. Even though I wanted to scream inside and do my usual stuff, I did something different, and that's all we can hope for. That
it's almost like to do co-parenting more effectively is you have to have the courage to be willing to do something different and finding what that difference really might make in the big picture of what you're trying to accomplish. The co-parents play, Joe, I'll go back to something that we were talking about earlier. The co-parents play a game of tug of war that it feels like they lose sight of the end goal. They're more about not wanting to get hurt and playing defense with each other. And part of their defense is sometimes to play offense, which is to use the court system to leverage a case in their direction because I need to get validated that I'm right in the way that I view this. And what I've found interesting, and I'll say this, and I hope parents hear this, is the court system really is so contentious because the family court system was devised by civil procedure. Civil procedure in the States is actually divided by a winner and a loser. Makes sense? If you're in a lawsuit civilly, someone's going to win and someone's going to lose, right? You're probably being sued for money or whatever else. What family law in the States was built on this same ideology. And so the approach that is taken in the legal system is to win or lose. And people spend so much money and exhaust their emotion through it so much, it's like they can't let go. It's like, I've already spent $100-something thousand on this divorce. I'm not letting go of my possession schedule. I'm not going to give her XYZ, or I'm not going to give him XYZ. And that's the tug. And the child is just sitting there going, can everyone just love everyone? And so,
like you say, it's a win-lose scenario. The difference is how much am I going to lose by? Do you know what I mean? But there's going to be a loser. How much am I going to lose by, and how much am I going to win by? And like you said, the child's in the middle saying, "Can't we just love each other?" It's
so, Joe.
Hopefully that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was going to ask you a question about a child. So, what I want to ask you is, and you've worked with enough children. I mean, since 2012, you've talked to a lot of children, been through a lot of family dynamics. What is the little voice that the child does not show us? So the child shows us behavior. They may act out, everything else. And you said they may push away the custodial parent point, right? They may end up away both parents by the end of it as adults. If the child felt that the little voice inside of them would actually be heard, what do you suppose that voice would actually say to those parents?
That's, like you say, I think that voice would be, can you please stop putting each other down? Because essentially what you're doing, I'm part of both of you. So when I hear you, I've even seen it in sessions, and I've had to kind of change the subject where, one parent saying, they're a deadbeat, they do this, they don't do that. I think that child would say, please stop putting each other down because you're putting me down. It's the same thing. I'm part of you. We share the same DNA. So if you're saying this person's piece of, what, and that person is, you're indirectly saying that to me as your child.
That hurts me. It's interesting because I feel like I've heard that voice of children before, but they would never. I mean, it's almost as if it's like it would be sacrilegious to say this to my parents, like to really say what my inner child is saying to them. They don't say. I'm so glad you said it, Joe, because kids won't say it. In some, I've had some do this. I've had some kids put both parents. They've asked me put both my parents in the room. I tell the parents, "Hey, rule of today, no comments. You're just going to listen to me today." And I let the kid just down. I let them say whatever they want. They finally felt like they could. And the kind of stuff.
That must be so powerful, Michael. That must be a really powerful thing, because we often have, parents and the child has said something, and they almost look shocked, as if to say, "I didn't know that's how you felt." Well, he's telling you. Your daughter is saying she doesn't like the way that you two are with each other, and she's telling you that, and she's going to go and write a list, but then one of them decides that he doesn't want to see this list. And that's what's heartbreaking, because if you're not willing to listen to your daughter, I don't know who else they would listen to. But yeah, that is the one thing that frustrates the young people. And parents may say in frustration, they may not mean to go and say these sorts of things. But that's why and then they'll probably find that the young person will start sticking up for the other person, even if they know that person's wrong, because it is almost an attack on me.
Yeah,
indirect.
100%. I want to do this, Joe, because you've been so generous with your time, and I can't continue to ask you to do so much. I know you have so many people to help and serve. I want to go over a couple things and have you share some things at the end of this. I was taking some notes as you were speaking, and I want parents to remember that, one of the impacts or some of the impacts of not co-parenting effectively is your children could end up resenting you in the end, right?
Yeah.
The kids can grow up, they will grow up, and they may end up resenting their parents, a parent or parents, by the end of it. That the impact is pretty much the same when parents separate. So when you're together in a relationship and there's issues in the relationship, even when you separate, the impact of those issues is still magnetized, like it's still there for the kids.
Yeah.
Kids sometimes will find bonds outside family unions. You talked about gangs. Yeah. We have that same issue here. A lot of the kids in the gangs have broken homes, right? And they're finding someone to love or something to live for, and they get a friend group, right, that says, "Oh, you're our family now," and they bring them in that way. Children, I love when you said this. Children can sense when something is wrong, even if you're having a fight in a separate room, right? The children can sense there's something wrong. There's an energy, right? They can sense that stuff. The blame, right? Another impact of not co-parenting well is you get into the blame game. It's the point back and forth. My grandma used to say, when you point a finger at one person, there's 3 pointing back at yourself. So you got to be cognizant.
That is so true.
Like that, So she's like, you got to keep thinking of, you got to start with you in some ways. I like when you said that co-parenting starts with developing a similar goal, right? We call it parental alignment. Or do we align?
Yep.
You asked, what is the motivation? What a great question. Getting in the right frame of mind as a co-parent, I think is huge. Like, really, this is like looking at yourself and going, am I in the right frame of mind when it comes to my ability to co-parent? Like, how flexible am I, to do this? Benefits the most from the two of you co-parenting? What a great question. Who benefits the most from the two of you deciding to co-parent? What do you both agree on, right? Because they're coming in with all the things they disagree. And you just go, let me flip that for a second. And then what are you doing to achieve it? I wrote all this stuff down. This is just beautiful. I had to go through this. If things were to work, what differences would that make? Because like you said, it's the differences, right? We're not talking about how to get there yet. We're talking about how the differences they would make. I love this idea of the problem saturated, that they're not noticing them. They're so problem saturated. And I agree that co-parents get so caught in what's not working that they can't even see the minimal differences, the little things that create the most impactful change. We call it the millimeter shift, is what we call it at Brighter Possibilities. Can you please stop putting each other down? And then I'm part of you both. This is a child's inner voice. Yeah. Right? Yeah. The child wants the parent to stop putting each other down and remembering they're part of both of you. Joe, this is really magical. Like, I love this. I don't know if you're up for it. Would you be willing to do a part 2 where we would continue this dialogue? Because we get people that ask questions, and so they may want to know more information. And if you're up for it, we'll work with your time as well. We'd love to have you guys back.
We can bring my colleague.
Oh, I would love it.
Yeah. We can bring her along because when we first started out, Aisha was the parental expert because she worked with parents in schools and I worked with young people. So we kind of got together, and that's how we started the charity, really. But I think what was difficult for me, before I used solution focused, I think my natural kind of emotion was always with the young person. Do you know what I mean? And
yes, sir.
When I was solution focused and I started to ask the right questions, it became a lot more neutral, because as soon as, if you're working with parents and they can sniff that you're blaming me for this. Do you know what I mean? if you lose the parents, that young person's going to suffer in the end.
Yes.
So it's a tricky one, but it's so worth doing because I've seen too many poor young guys and girls, develop anxiety, eating disorders, like we were saying earlier, getting into the wrong crowds, trying drugs out. And,
they look for external solutions to an internal problem.
Parenting is too important to leave to chance, right? And we can't we can't share their future. So what young people do we want to leave behind that are going to carry our name? Think of that.
What a great thing to leave them with. Joe, I would love people to know how to find you. How do they do that?
So our website's a good place to start. That's familybasedsolutions.org.uk. We've got a Facebook page. Do you know what, Michael? I'm of that age where this is all over Aisha's got all the stuff about. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're happy for parents to join our support groups. We normally have one in the morning and one in the evening so that working parents don't miss out. But if the time frame works for you guys, and I'm more than happy. Our admin normally advertises everything on Eventbrite, Michael.
Okay.
So if they look up family-based solutions on Eventbrite, the parent support groups will be on there. Training will be on there. And when we do parent support groups, it's not teaching you to be a parent. It's teaching parents solution-focused questions to get the most out of their conversations with their young people. So it's not a.
What are you charging for that, Joe?
No, the support groups are free. There's no charge for that. I think. Goodness. Yeah, if you email Aisha, Michael, I'm really sorry because, like I said, the social media stuff and everything else.
You're fine.
Goes completely over my head, but I know there's a lot of stuff out on Eventbrite, and
I think this speaks to the heart that you have for helping families to get this for free. I just can't say how dear to my heart when I got to meet you and Aisha in Texas, and I could just hear the love and the passion you have for helping families. How could I not say, Joe, we have to have you on a podcast. We have to have you all talk to these people.
We had a great time, mate. We had a great time at Fort Worth. It was really, really lovely. And we felt so welcomed.
Well,
really.
we want you back. We need to come visit you.
Oh, great. Yeah, come to London.
We'd love to. Well, Joe, this has been fantastic. Is there anything that I've missed, Joe, anything else that you think would be helpful that we could leave our listeners with?
You've been a very, very good host. I felt really comfortable. Hopefully I didn't ramble on too much because when I start,
it's great.
Difficult for me to stop. But no, thank you so much. And, let's look after our young ones because one day we might want them to look after us.
You said it right. I agree with you 100%. Well, Joe, I'm going to sign us off, and I want to thank you so much for being here. Please tell Aisha I also said hello, and we will connect again. And all of you listeners, we thank you so much for being a part of this. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram, Brighter Possibilities, Family Counseling, Facebook, Brighter Possibilities FC for Instagram. And we want to thank you again for being here. Keep moving forward, everyone. We appreciate you.
Thank you.